Hello everybody, this is a live update on Tropical Storm Elsa that continues to intensify. Hurricane Hunter aircraft has indicated a minimum pressure that's dropping near or even just below 1,000 millibars right near that center, and that's the consequence of this convection, this convective blob here trying to wrap around the center and leading to those pressure falls at the surface when you get this runaway latent heat release aloft, and the center is located right at the southern gradient of this convective blob here. Interestingly, there is a bit of a push-pull, almost an oscillatory effect. Those convective blobs will initiate right on the nose of this southerly low-level jet, and then you get a convective blob that will form here. Once it intensifies, it'll propagate from east to west toward the northern edge of this center, and then it'll anchor there right to the north of the center, contributing to a lot of latent heat release, surface pressure falls, and we have seen some organization of Elsa as it might even be approaching hurricane strength here if those extrapolated pressure values are accurate. You could definitely see some curvature as well in these bands off to the southeast of the center, definitely indicating some strengthening as well. And I'm watching this western edge to see if that'll wrap all the way around the center. If that happens, then you're going to get a tropical cyclone that's almost completely vertically aligned there. But take a look at the Hurricane Hunter aircraft data here. You can certainly see that pressure rise, showing you this recon data right meow. There you can see it, that pressure, the red line, dropping down to near 1,000 millibars on the latest pass. The Hurricane Hunters were a bit delayed getting to the storm this morning due to bad weather at Keesler Air Force Base, but they have arrived, and you can see that wind dropping down. You can see the center of the storm, that pressure dropping to near 1,000 millibars. And then we look at a subtle temperature rise as well. Check this out, showing that there is a little bit of sinking motion within that center. That red line, that little poke up right there, that's synonymous with that pressure fall, shows that there's sinking motion within the center of this tropical cyclone. That is because of the strength of the convection all the way around it. You get some sinking effect in the eye. The pressure falls continue to deepen as well, dragging in more of that convection toward the center. And we also have a tornado warning for the Labell area that we've been tracking, and you can even see it on Key West radar because this thing is extending so relatively high up into the atmosphere. And right now, I think that the closest radar site is up near the Tampa area, so keep in mind that we are scanning pretty high up into the storm, and the mesocyclone is likely located pretty close to the surface. But you can see this bean shape here. Sears, you're likely experiencing some easterly inflow into the supercell storm. If you look off to the west, you might see a wall cloud, maybe even a tornado there. But Labell, you certainly want to be in your safe place. Denard, Labell areas to the northwest of this bean-shaped supercell storm. And these supercells are developing right along the gradient of this stratiform, tropical stratiform range. So the stratiform range coming in here, this is the gradient. To the north, you're getting some surface heating and the development of some surface-based instability. To the south of it, rain falling down there. Warm rain processes, pretty heavy tropical rain. Normal tornado setups have these southerly low-level jets that they're fed by out of the south. And so normally the inflow would be coming into the south of a storm like this and be going through that rain-cooled air. But with a tropical cyclone, it's different. You've got easterly, if not northeasterly inflow coming in from that relatively unstable air off to the north of this environment. So that's why that rain to the south is not impeding it, and really just subtle convergence along this differential heating boundary here is leading to the formation of these supercell storms. These are going to lift well to the north of Cape Coral, but Labell, you definitely want to be in your safe place. This is a pretty long track, persistent, deep mesocyclone here that we are tracking. There it is. Even though the radar is relatively far away, it's still picking up that mesocyclone. The bright green color wind toward the radar. The other one is wind away from the radar. Definitely shows that mesocyclone heading in the direction of the Labell area despite being relatively far away from that radar site. So far, it's a radar indicated tornado warning there, lifting off to the northwest. 0 to 1 kilometer helicity values are borderline right along this boundary, but maybe some mesoscale enhancement right along this boundary here of that stratiform rain. And still the Tropical Storm Elsa is forecast to pass just to the west of Cape Coral. Could be close enough, though, to bring those strong southwesterly winds into these bays, which would lead to a dangerous storm surge, even a 3 to 5 foot storm surge there. I do think that the greatest storm surge is likely to be in the Tampa area, as this thing could be nearing Category 1 hurricane strength, and then southwesterlies right along the southwest of that circulation. Once those come ashore, that's going to bring in that 3 to 5 foot storm surge into Tampa late this evening, 10, 11 p.m., maybe midnight. And then it heads even further to the north, and it's going to bring that storm surge with it. Right now, the official forecast track is just to the east of the Cedar Key area. That would bring most of the surge to the east of Cedar Key, but if this thing passes just to the west of there, you're going to get those southwesterly winds coming in there as well, piling up that water 3 to 5 feet, definitely above normal levels, even above ground level. Homosassa Springs there, Cedar Key, Spring Hill, Tampa Bay, anywhere north of there is going to have that dangerous storm surge late night tonight. And it does look like a supercell storm is trying to get organized here to the west of Orlando too. The HRRR was picking up on this scenario pretty well. Right now, pretty broad rotation, but does appear to be increasing. See all those greens happening there? That's showing that inflow, easterly inflow, increasing into this supercell storm. Even a little bit of an RFD structure starting to organize in a storm relative sense there. So I think that these storms are also going to get tornado warnings starting to the west of Orlando, and they'll continue to propagate off to the northwest. Going to be pretty close to Homosassa Springs there as well. So keep an eye on this cluster of storms. Also, some storms trying to get supercellular structure to the south of Orlando, but this is likely the closest thing to a supercell up in this mode right now. It's got a little bit of a hook-like appendage even, a little bit of a core right there, pulling in that easterly inflow on this thing in a storm relative sense. And definitely need to keep an eye out on that storm as well, that cluster to the west of Orlando, lifting off to the northwest, eventually toward these portions east of Homosassa Springs there. Bushnell, keep an eye on that storm as well, as it's located to your east-southeast. Even the villages, keep an eye on that in case this northern one decides to intensify. But right now it looks like this southern one is starting to dominate. And that's going to be one of the big risk factors, is the tornado threat over the Florida Panhandle as well with this tropical cyclone. I'm interested to see what the Hurricane Center does with that recon data. Definitely showing an intensifying storm, and you can see this curvature within the southern periphery of that convective band, showing that this convection is trying to wrap around the northwest side of that center of circulation. Again, that center did measure that near 1,000 millibar minimum pressure with this thing, so it definitely is a concern as this lifts off to the north. We can also look at the convective tops and see how that convective burst is going. And interestingly, these southerlies, these streamers coming in here that are getting eroded a bit by the dry air, once they hit this convergent area, once those winds shift to easterly, right at the nose of that low-level jet is where these convective bursts will get going, and then they'll propagate up shear to the north side of that system and even try to wrap around the center of circulation. And we've kind of been seeing that oscillatory effect that was indicated by the HWRF model so far, where this convection will form right at the nose of these streamers, propagate northwest, anchor on the north side of that circulation, release a lot of latent heat, lead to some surface pressure falls near the surface of that storm. Even though it's not wrapping all the way around, that convection is close enough to that center to lead to those surface pressure falls. And there certainly is a chance that this thing could make a run at hurricane as it lifts off to the north. It's almost like the outflow from these convective bursts are counteracting the westerly wind shear just a bit as the storm lifts off to the north. So let's take a look at satellite imagery here. And then we could see that convective burst in action and kind of assess its health. This also shows the dry air that's coming in on the south side of the circulation, curling up toward that convective burst. And this latest convective burst definitely looks quite healthy on satellite here, water vapor, and especially infrared. Look at that thing. Very healthy convective burst wrapping in. You're starting to see a little bit of some warming of these cloud tops. So it is possible that we're starting to see that oscillation a little bit. We probably peaked at about 1,000 millibars, maybe just a little bit below that. And then if this convection weakens a little bit and that latent heat release will wane, that will lead to a bit of a surface pressure rise, and then the westerly wind shear will dominate once again. But then right in the nose of those southwesterlies is likely to get another convective burst that will form and then propagate west around that. And eventually one of these will probably send it over the edge, maybe even to a Category 1 storm. But it does kind of have that subtropical look to it with this dry air wrapping in, almost a low-level jet off to the east. Tornado zone is a little bit decoupled from the surface low as well, but definitely a convective burst, and the dirty side of this system, the east side of this tropical storm, is going to get dragged right along the western edge of the Florida Peninsula, and eventually this could also be a problem for the East Coast as it lifts off to the northeast. It's very possible. Looks like the National Hurricane Center re-intensifies this thing to a tropical storm. Virginia Beach, you're going to have some stormy conditions as well, potentially with a tropical storm, gusty conditions. That's going to be on July 8th. So that's going to be on Thursday evening when that finally reaches the Virginia Beach area. Even New York is included in that cone. So the East Coast certainly could get some coastal flooding, breezy conditions, and as this thing transitions into an extratropical cyclone and that wind field expands, I would be surprised to see that coastal flooding all the way up here, and possibly a direct impact of a tropical storm transitioning to extratropical as it moves close to Nova Scotia. And the trough that is supposed to be picking this storm up is definitely causing some severe thunderstorm warnings near central New York as well right now, which we can take a look at as we're monitoring tornado warnings that are approaching Labell. You want to get in your safe place, Labell. I would be chasing Elsa, except I am keeping a very close eye on Friday. It looks like eastern Nebraska into central Iowa could be a tornado threat, northwest flow event. Very potent shortwave trough coming in northwest to southeast in that flow. But we do have a cluster of hail producers here beneath that cold upper trough across central New York, west of Albany. Definitely some decent cores out here across central New York. Keep an eye on. No supercell structures out here. Just little organized enough to generate some severe thunderstorm warnings. We do have tornado potential in the Florida Peninsula right now, and we do have one tornado warning. That is for Labell. Come on. It's closing in on Labell right now. So if you're in Labell, you want to be in your safe place. It does look like, based on some recent radar trends, that mesocyclone may be weakening just a little bit or passing toward Denard. So it looks like it's going to pass just to the south of Labell. This is pretty far from the radar site. Looks like it's pivoting a bit as well. Here, this is a Miami radar off to the southeast. Still a radar indicated tornado warning as that lifts off to the northeast. You've got a little bit of rotation for the cell to the west of Labell as well. I wouldn't be surprised if that also gets a tornado warning. And we're watching that cluster to the west of Orlando as well for the development of maybe some supercell storms up there. Yep, that's Elsa. We're keeping a close eye on that one to the west of Orlando. Looks like it's trying to become more of a supercell storm. Looks like this has cycled, and now this is becoming the dominant hook-like appendage here. It'll probably have to pivot all the way around, and then we'll likely see tornado warnings issued for that cluster of storms. Bushnell, keep an eye on that. The Villages even, if you're on Lake Harris, keep an eye on that as well. Inverness, way upstream after a while. You need to keep an eye on this cluster of developing supercell storms to the west of Orlando that could pose a threat as they lift off to the northwest here. So, let's see if that's... I'm interested in the next Hurricane Hunter, and there it is. There is the special advisory. Wind speed increased to 70 miles an hour. That minimum pressure down to 1,000 millibars. So this is the latest from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, showing that surface pressure fall of 7 millibars since the last advisory. Winds, max sustained winds at 70 miles an hour. So I bet that the adjusted forecast track eventually could show this thing intensifying to a low-end hurricane. The H-Wharf did show this system intensifying right about here and then weakening a little bit as it gets closer to land. With those convective bursts kind of timed such that very easily could maintain tropical storm status. But it's already up to 70 miles an hour, confirmed by radar data out of Key West too, scanning up higher up above the ground a bit. But definitely some velocities, max sustained winds of 70 miles an hour within this convective band just to the north of the center. The center is likely just in the southwest nose of that convective element as it's trying to wrap around the west side of that circulation. So that's the new data here coming in, and you can see the curvature of this convective shield as well. This cyclonic curvature here also is a sign that this thing continues to intensify. That convection is holding firm there this time, it appears. Firm enough to result in quite a bit of latent heat release in this. Definitely continuing to drive that surface pressure down a little bit. And this thing is starting to approach Category 1 hurricane strength. The National Hurricane Center has kept it at a high-end tropical storm so far with this update. And it looks like we are welcome to this live coverage of this system. Thank you guys for joining me on here. Hello, everybody. Glad to see that this internet is doing a little bit better. Polk County, you could get a storm surge. Definitely when the southwesterlies come in here up into Tampa Bay, it's going to pile up that water 3 to 5 feet above normal levels, inundating the immediate surrounding coast as well. You know the low-lying areas out there. Take a look at your altitude with respect to sea level as well. And if you're below that 5 feet in sea level, and especially if you're along the periphery of one of these bays in the Tampa area, down towards Sarasota as well, southwesterlies will be piling up that water. Bradenton, all these areas along the periphery of Tampa Bay. St. Petersburg, we'll likely see some flooding as well. So you need to keep an eye out. That's going to be late evening, like a 10, 11 p.m., maybe a little bit closer to midnight as well. But looks like we dropped that tornado warning for the Labell area, which is good news. I am watching for new development along the leading edge of this stratiform precipitation, right along that gradient. A little bit of subtle convergence here. Some more easterlies. And then you get some more southeasterlies within this rain, and that convergence right along this leading edge could fire some storms. Looks like one just to the west of Lake Okeechobee there. Still have that special weather statement to the west of Orlando. We're monitoring that storm for maturation, and this cluster off to the south. These are largely just air mass storms so far. The wind shear is pretty marginal this far removed from the center. Really, the low-level helicity is maximized in that ring right along the northeastern quadrant, a little bit closer to that center, but still 150 0 to 1 kilometer shear, more than sufficient to generate a tornado threat. Bushnell, keep an eye on these supercell storms just to your east. They seem to be maturing as they move off to the northwest toward the Bushnell area there. Definitely could be a tornado warning issued with that shortly. Monitoring the rotation here as well. Not a ton of good radar sites located here in the center of Florida. You got some of these smaller radar sites. This one's located near Kissimmee, showing that hook-like appendage to the south of Mineola here. Definitely getting some rotation, getting some easterly storm relative inflow into this thing. Cyclonic curvature to the hook-like appendage. So that's the storm with the more immediate tornado threat just to the south of Mineola. Not a tornado warning yet. But it does continue to organize locations like Center Hill, Mabel, Webster, up in these areas upstream. You've noticed how these things are going up bean-shaped as well. That's a sign of just how strong that wind shear really is here. And I'm about to put some of that pork back on the stove here. I'm going to eat some pork tacos for lunch as I'm ripping this live stream here. But again, the new update from the Hurricane Center, 70 mile an hour sustained winds. Extrapolated sea level pressure down to 1,000 millibars. We saw that on this latest Hurricane Recon Pass. I can show you that right now as well. For those of you that are just joining me here, I'll show you that data that has led to this upgrade in intensity. And there you can see it. That extrapolated pressure, the red line, measured by Hurricane Hunter aircraft. This is on the tropicaltidbits.com website, run by the legendary Levi Cohen. And look at that drop all the way down to right at 1,000 millibars, wind minimum as well near that center. And then it's also associated with a temperature rise. Look at that little wiggle upward right there on the red line. Temperature increasing near the center of this storm. That shows that there's subsidence along the periphery of that intense convection. That sinking motion causes the temperature to rise just a little bit. That also shows that center of circulation is organizing and responding to that more intense convection. Back over to the Radar Omega app here. Let's take a look at satellite imagery. Now I'm going to be slinging these lives through the evening as well. Look at that convective burst. Still holding steady up there. It looks like there was just a little bit of warming starting to happen. That could be a sign that this thing peaked and it's starting to warm again a little bit. We'll just have to see if there's another burst right on the leading edge of this low-level jet-like feature out of the south. Could be, this is the zone to watch for those new convective bursts, and then they'll propagate back west toward the center. But based on radar, it looks like still a healthy amount of latent heat release happening with that convection. Anchored just on the center, you still have this dry air cutting in on the west side of the circulation, a little bit of westerly shear. But it is possible that the outflow associated with this convective burst is acting to carve out a little bubble of favorable atmospheric conditions for continued intensification as this lifts off to the north. These cloud tops here are associated with that upper level low, downstream of which you're getting this westerly wind burst and a little bit of a dry pocket too, helping to pinch off the western side and make that western side a bit dry with this tropical system. Looks like a little bit shift to the east too in the forecast track, so I wouldn't be surprised if this thing barrels right into Tampa Bay this evening. A lot of ground teams, a lot of storm chasers out there. I probably should be on the ground as well, but I figure I'll be better served doing these live weather briefings and then chasing eastern Nebraska into Iowa on Friday, where I think that there's a pretty good chance of supercells, tornadoes, very large hail, all hazards possible out there. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on that, likely blasting east toward the central plains of eastern Nebraska and Iowa on Friday. Looks like I might be back out there with the writer of the Twister reboot. That movie does appear to be happening. Not for sure yet, but definitely the ball is moving. And you can see this dry air wrapping around that circulation a little bit with this, leading to a tilt. And definitely a dry western and southern semicircle with this system. That dry air wrapping all the way around. And then here you got that upgrade. 70 mile an hour. We definitely are pushing hurricane strength with this. Not sure if it's going to make it. It might kind of hover here right at the high end tropical storm, but you don't want to split hairs. Still going to be impacts here. Cape Coral, you're already getting impacts, and all the way up toward Tampa, to the north of Tampa. 3 to 5 foot storm surge up there where those southwesterlies are able to come ashore. And we're just going to continue to watch this thing. Let me run this loop. Thank you guys for joining my weather reports here. Let's take a look at the tornado potential. Let's see what kind of tornado potential there's going to be in the central Florida peninsula here. Pull up. Oh, first I want to show you this 6Z HWRF model and how well it did to show this kind of oscillatory effect between those convective bursts just to the east of center. And the 6Z HWRF last night really did a good job on picking up on this structure. This is from Tropical Tidbits here as well. Watch what happens. Upon Cuba, you had this convective burst near the Florida Keys, a little bit removed from the center. And then watch what happens with the HWRF expanding that convective burst. It propagates up shear, wraps around that center. So you're getting a lot of latent heat release on the north side of the center, leading to those surface pressure falls. The model responds, bringing that pressure down to the upper 990s. And look at that convection wrapping all the way around the northwest side. And then you get a waning of the convection in that zone, right on the northern tip of that low-level jet. And it causes pressure rises a little bit as you get a reduction of that latent heat release. Then you get another convective burst happening right in the usual area there to the east of the center. And that will propagate back toward the center, wrap around it, and then you get more pressure falls. And we're kind of seeing that oscillation right now, that push-pull action between these two counterweights. You have the wind shear coming in from the west. You also have the convective bursts that are battling against that wind shear. And let's take a look now at the tornado potential over the Florida Peninsula. We can look at the new HWRF, or pardon me, the HRRR model, and we can kind of see where those different storms develop. A couple different bands of supercell storms I could see evolving. Let's look at the latest HRRR so we could pick up on some of the mesoscale here. Probably needs to be reinitialized with that 1,000 millibar system that seems to be intensifying a bit. That's at 18Z. 20Z. We're at about 19Z right now, so this is in about an hour. Definitely shows these supercell storms, the one that prompted that tornado warning near Labell, developing right on that periphery of that cloud shield there. Zoom in on this. Probably can't see it, but right there, that's that arc of supercells that develops right along the periphery of that stratiform rain. But I'm also watching this zone up here where there's greater instability, maybe not as quite the wind shear, but you get some more instability up there to the west of Orlando. And it's only a matter of time for this cluster to mature. This latest HRRR doesn't like that mode to develop. Maybe some subsidence along the outer periphery of the core of this tropical cyclone. But it does show those storms that are developing near Miami, continuing to ride northwest, and eventually when they get closer to the northeast quadrant of that tropical cyclone, these are likely to have tornado potential right near that gradient of the stratiform rain, lifting off to the northwest toward the Tampa Bay region. So this is a stripe of tornado potential, most likely, but I'm still watching that zone near Orlando for development. This latest HRRR doesn't show that area blossoming even through 0Z. It kind of shows this convective band becoming dominant that's located right along that leading periphery of the stratiform rain. We can look at the storm relative helicity here, and I can show you the photographs. And it doesn't, the latest HRRR doesn't really carve out that area further north to the west of Orlando, but looking at radar, there definitely is some potential there. It does show that stronger wind shear kind of embedded within the stratiform rain. You can see the 0 to 1 kilometer shear vector here with the photograph. Surface winds due easterly, go aloft, and you increase up to a southeasterly wind direction. Storm motion up here due south, so you do have quite a bit of streamwise vorticity here, quite a bit of storm relative helicity. Storm motion vector pretty close to 90 degrees here. A lot of easterlies with these front right quadrants of these tropical systems, but that's usually how the photograph looks there in the northeastern quadrant of these systems. You see the greater helicity located offshore, a little bit closer to the center of that surface low, and this area that's been destabilized. Not a lot of wind shear up there across the Florida Peninsula, with some veering of those winds being indicated by the models upstream. Well, you do have some easterlies there, so let's wonder why. Do have some weaker 850s up there. Really, the strongest wind shear is near the core of these 850 winds out of the southeast in the northeast quadrant, extending all the way to the north side of that tropical cyclone. Basically a glorified surface low there. Late night, getting pretty close to the Tampa Bay area. Don't really want to use the HRRR though for tropical cyclone prediction, or the 3 kilometer NOAA. These convective allowing models generally don't do as well, but they are showing that further west track, missing Tampa a little bit and then slamming the Big Bend as an intensifying storm tomorrow morning. Could be nearing hurricane strength right there. The hurricane models as of 12Z. Really, the official forecast track kind of followed the GFS and the European models showing this intensification, but the hurricane models largely just show steady state, maintaining a tropical storm and then weakening after landfall. A little bit of a bubble up to there, 84 hours as it moves just offshore the East Coast. Could even impact New York there as well. But really, none of the models this morning were showing an intensification to a hurricane except the European model. The global models were also showing that. 12Z GFS showing a little bit further west track in those hurricane models, staying offshore Tampa Bay, impacting the Florida Big Bend, where those hurricane watches are still in effect. And we now have a hurricane warning that has been issued. So the official forecast track by the National Hurricane Center does show intensifying into a hurricane. So we do have a hurricane warning from the Tampa Bay area up through a southern portion of the Florida Big Bend in red. That's that hurricane warning area. Hot off the press based on that hurricane recon data showing intensification. So now it is forecast to be a Category 1 hurricane making landfall in the Florida Big Bend area Wednesday morning. But that damaging storm surge arrives late evening into the early morning hours into the Tampa Bay area. Have to keep a close eye on that as well. So there it is. The official Hurricane Center forecast track does have Elsa becoming a hurricane. Tropical storm now, but 75-mile-an-hour winds at landfall, 12 hours. As of 18Z, we've got 70 miles an hour, and it is forecast to become a hurricane. Here's the text: a special advisory to issue a hurricane warning for a portion of the Florida Gulf Coast. Recent observations from a Air Force Reserve Unit Hurricane Hunter aircraft do indicate that the maximum winds in Elsa are near 60 knots. However, the aircraft has not yet had a chance to sample the northwestern quadrant, so it is possible that higher winds exist, so it may already be a hurricane. Although the environment is not conducive for significant strengthening, only a slight increase in intensity would result in a hurricane tonight through early Wednesday. So there you have it. Hurricane Elsa, or Tropical Storm Elsa, right now forecast to be a Category 1 hurricane just offshore Cape Coral there. Despite this tilted structure, those convective bursts have won out, battling against this dry air in that wind shear. And I think that this thing is going to become a Category 1 hurricane as it lifts off to the north, bringing with it similar impacts, but maybe even a tick higher in that storm surge. 3 to 5 foot surge expected. Cape Coral up through Tampa, those storm surge prone areas, and especially the concave portion of this shoreline. Landfall very close to Cedar Key tomorrow morning. About 6 a.m., 7 a.m. right now being indicated there. And then you do have these tropical storm watches as well over portions of southeastern South Carolina there as well. So we need to keep a close eye on this. It is nearing hurricane strength. There you can see that water vapor imagery. Infrared showing how healthy that convective burst still remains near the center. So that's leading to a lot of latent heat release, continued surface pressure falls, and it looks like this thing is going to become a Category 1 hurricane as it lifts off to the north, potentially impacting portions of Tampa as well. A little bit of some warming of the cloud tops evident here, but still very cold cloud tops closer to the center over the western portion here. So I do expect this thing to continue to intensify. So if you guys are just joining me, it looks like we have got a fast track up to a hurricane here happening. We are breaking it down live. We've been live on here for about a half an hour. And there you can see that official track, Category 1 hurricane, coming very close to Tampa, maybe wobbling even a little bit west. Let's take a look at the radar data here and see how that convection is progressing. Wondering too if I should catch a flight out here. So yeah, we definitely have some convection wrapping around that center now. Look at that. Nosing down. So that convection is trying to wrap all the way around this center. This thing is going to make a run at hurricane, folks. A little dry air coming in here. I don't think that convection is going to close all the way around. But you could definitely see that convection wrapping around the northwest side of this center. Located right there with that pressure down to about 999 millibars. 999.4. Measured by Hurricane Hunter aircraft. You can see this big streamer, big inflow band coming in from the tropics as well. And the deeper convection located near the center, just to the north of the center, leading to those pressure falls down, getting pretty close to 1,000 millibars, upper 999s out there. This thing probably some evaporational cooling wrapping around this with that dry air. Probably going to be a nice gust front right on that western eye wall there. But runaway latent heat release happening up here. Surface pressure is dropping. Looks like about 1,000 millibars right now. Probably is going to be a Cat 1 hurricane. Even though it is a category up, really not much is changing. It's still going to be significant impacts. Dirty side of this system lifting off to the north. Rain starting to fall now in Cape Coral with those easterlies happening. Watching this cluster here out near Miami to lift off to the northwest and maybe develop some tornado potential, but you can really see this convective burst wrapping around the center, beating out that wind shear, curling all the way around the center of circulation, locating right there. Good idea to take a look at the rainfall data. Let's look and see what some of these models are showing in terms of rainfall. This is what we're looking at for rainfall totals, mainly across the western half of the Florida Peninsula. But wherever these bands set up, where these convective bursts happen, looks like near just to the south of Tampa, 6 to 8 inches of rainfall. Definitely coming on shore there. Looks like the Big Bend area is going to get hammered by big rainfall, 5 to 6 inches of rain, maybe even greater than that. It is moving though, so we're not going to see those crazy, like in excess of a foot type rainfall totals, but definitely flooding rainfall across the western Florida Peninsula here, and also lifting northeast with time. Look at that stripe of heavy rainfall across central and eastern South Carolina, southeastern Georgia, pushing double-digit rainfall totals even up there. So certainly big rain is being indicated by this event. The GFS also shows several inches of rain, southeastern Georgia getting hammered, and into central and eastern South Carolina. So it looks like this thing is making a run at hurricane, everybody. There you can see that convection wrapping around. Definitely is making a big time run at hurricane. It is happening. And I'm just going to continue to run this loop here, and I'm going to go put my pork tacos on the stove, and then I'm going to come back and continue to break this down. I'll be back a little bit sooner if I see any tornado warnings that are issued. But thank you for tuning into my weather report as this new data is coming in. Hurricane, Category 1 hurricane, looks to be happening. Thank you, everybody, for joining me on this live update. We got something on there. Hurricane warning has been issued, and that includes the Tampa area, as Elsa is expected to increase into a Category 1 storm. Look at this convection pivoting around, wrapping around the north and the east side, coming around the south side as well here. Probably already is a hurricane, but Hurricane Hunter aircraft has shown a 999 surface pressure. So it definitely is intensifying. This convective burst that developed in the nose of this low-level jet propagated closer to the center, and it's maintained itself there, leading to latent heat release, further pressure falls. That low pressure leads to more convergence and the easier ability to maintain that convection along its northern periphery. Also, outflow is being generated by that convective blob, and that helps to curtail the westerly wind shear that has been plaguing the system just a little bit, kind of a counterweight to prevent that rapid intensification. But it is expected on the next update, that's by 6 p.m. this evening, to be named Hurricane Elsa on approach to Tampa Bay. That means stronger southwesterlies, even a bigger surge than the 3 to 5 foot surge anticipated up there in Tampa Bay. Definitely is an organizing tropical cyclone lifting off to the north. We are live, dominating this live coverage here. And I'm going to continue to go live, likely through the evening on this deal. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in here. Looks like the internet's doing a lot better. You definitely do need to be concerned as well on the East Coast as this lifts off to the northeast, southeastern Georgia, central and eastern South Carolina, North Carolina, even up toward the New York City area could get some issues. Definitely could get some flash flooding in southeastern Georgia, however. Again, that Hurricane Hunter aircraft data coming in hot, responsible for this intensification up there. Let's see what the new HWRF shows. So here is the new HWRF. I'm going to show you this right now. Loop this. There, you can see it. This is from, this shows the HWRF, showing that convection wrapping around the north side at about 15Z. And as we step forward with time, watch this thing deepen, responding to that convection. This is at 18Z, so about right now. It did show this convective bubble started to weaken just a little bit. But there is that surface pressure down to 1,000 millibars, which is quite accurate. Another convective burst going off to its east. And the HWRF shows it to oscillate down a little bit by the next update and even become more decoupled a bit from the convective burst. The current convective burst dies out a little bit. Then you get a new convective burst on the nose of that low-level jet with that dry air. This will likely propagate around the north side and help to proliferate another intensification late night tonight. So this is at 3Z, right about when these southwesterlies arrive up into Tampa Bay. Big surge at this point. The HWRF shows a little bit of a wobble west away from Tampa Bay as this but a new convective burst around the north side shows that it could make another run at hurricane. And it definitely shows that oscillatory nature of this thing with almost a subtropical feel to it. As the convective burst gets going on the nose of that low-level jet, propagates west to the north side of that circulation, leads to latent heat release, surface pressure falls. That's what's happening right now as we are pushing hurricane strength there. And then that one will wane a little bit, almost like an occlusion. And then you get the next convective burst forming on the nose of that low-level jet to the east of it. That propagates around the center, leads to more pressure falls, more latent heat release. And then you get another run at hurricane before it makes landfall here. But it looks like it's going to be a relatively steady state, right along that borderline between a tropical storm and a hurricane, oscillating back and forth as those bubbles, those convective bursts, will have their influence on surface pressure falls. And right now we got a very low pressure that's causing some of these winds to get pulled around the outside, outer periphery, as that pressure gradient force increases a bit. And then you still got this low-level jet off to the east. And on the nose of it, that's the zone where you get those convective bursts. We'll just have to see if this convection can wrap all the way around the center and enclose that eye, because that's when you're going to get the max efficiency as a heat engine of this tropical storm. And I would be chasing this, but I'm keeping an eye on eastern Nebraska and Iowa for storm chase potential on Friday, as it looks like a northwesterly flow event is going to arrive up there. Tornadoes, very large hail appear likely across eastern Nebraska into Iowa on Friday. I'll break that down in future live updates, but that's my storm chasing plan, is to position for that. I'm not quite ready to get damp yet in these tropical storms. If this was a higher end hurricane, though, I'd definitely be going after it. But I figure I'll break these down live and then head east toward eastern Nebraska and Iowa to intercept a potential severe weather outbreak. Alright, gotta check on my pork. Probably burning. Hello everybody, back in the saddle here. Definitely are getting some wraparound of this convection, but it looks like it's getting a little bit more diffuse, the gradient of that convection. It also looks like, I'm wondering if the center is wobbling just a little bit further east because of this convection. You can see kind of this concavity to the center here. We definitely are getting a wrapping around of those radar echoes. Zooming back out, let's see if we have any. No tornado warnings yet, and in fact that cluster to the west of Orlando has definitely weakened and lost maturity as it lifts off to the northwest through Bushnell. Just a little bit of a squall there. So I think that the HRRR model was definitely picking up on this mode here, not being that particularly conducive for tornadoes. It seems like most of the shear is lagging a little bit behind, a little bit closer to that system. It did, however, show this band of storms intensifying, but it did prompt a tornado warning earlier near Labell. But so far, the tornado portion of this storm has been pretty weak. The National Hurricane Center does intensify this storm into a low-end hurricane as it lifts off to the north. We have seen kind of this oscillatory effect with convective bursts being able to kind of carve out a little bubble of environmental conditions that are favorable for continued intensification. Then usually the models are showing this convective blob to weaken, then a new one will form off to the east and propagate back around it. But this convection has been quite persistent here. It definitely has a comma shape. You got dry air coming in on the south side. You have streamers here on the east side as well. Definitely looks like very healthy convection, and it is trying to wrap around this center a bit. So even though the center right now is at the tail end of this convection, it might be propagating just a little bit further east, a little bit closer to the coast, likely because of that runaway latent heat release up here leading to pressure falls a little bit further east. This blob is where the max latent heat release is happening right now. Big squalls here, big winds gusting over, well, probably over 80 miles an hour there on the north side of that center. And it looks like this feeder band also is propagating a little bit closer. So you probably have further pressure falls here, causing wind to go in toward that low pressure, dragging this feeder band a little bit closer. And it's trying to develop a vertically oriented compact core here as it lifts off to the north. I wonder if this thing makes landfall a little bit to the south of Tampa, somewhere on the eastern edge of this cone, based on these latest radar trends very easily. Could be a little bit further off to the east. We'll have to look at that new Hurricane Hunter data as well. And looking at this convective element near Miami, special marine warning issued here, capable of producing water spouts there. Usually this is a little bit far south. Usually the tornado potential is maximized on the northeastern quadrant of these hurricanes. This one's kind of on the southeastern quadrant of this storm, but you still could get a water spout, maybe an isolated tornado here, but these are probably more fair weather water spouts coming ashore. Probably a little bit too windy to really have a robust fair weather water spout threat. But this supercell storm here is worth watching. Another one to the southeast of Labell. Even though it is enveloped within that stratiform rain, the wind shear can usually be so intense with these systems that they can be capable of drilling through it. It does have a little bit of a bean shape to it. Let's see if it has any velocity. Not much, just some convergence there. No couplet that's really drilling down to the surface with that storm heading off to the northwest, but still worth keeping an eye on that convective band. You can see the convergence and that convection bringing down some stronger velocities as well. Squally conditions here with these, but I'm not seeing any immediate tornado potential with these just yet. Just watching this system lift off to the north. The National Hurricane Center does have it at a Category 1 hurricane, and they have issued hurricane warnings. Tampa all the way north through the Florida Big Bend. Someone's going to get a big surge here, and it's likely going to be where these southwesterlies impact the coastline. Tampa Bay, Florida Big Bend up here, maybe even Cape Coral with those southwesterlies. You could get a couple foot storm surge there as well. Let's take a look at satellite and see how the convective burst is trending. Look at the tops. We could look at water vapor. I'd like to go back to that Gulf of Mexico view. This is the Radar Omega app we are using here. It does show a little bit of some warming of the cloud tops to the east. You can see these starting to warm just a little bit. In fact, just a general warming. It's possible it's showing that this convection is starting to pulse down just a little bit. It'll be interesting to see the next update. Definitely a very sharp gradient here in the western edge, but look at the motion there of this convection outflow or a convective burst that is battling the westerly wind shear here, kind of carving out a little pocket for this storm to continue to intensify. And that's why it does look like it's going to be a Category 1 hurricane as it lifts off to the north. Monitoring a tornado potential here. You can see these colder cloud tops near the Orlando area. Some of those clusters that just haven't quite made it. The upper level winds up here are more out of the southwest to northeast, so I think that the deep layer shear isn't quite as favorable. These things are getting driven by the low level winds to the northwest. Many of the models aren't showing as strong low-level wind shear up there across the central Florida peninsula, as were previously indicated. Most of the wind shear hugs this system, the northeastern quadrant of this system, just off the southwestern coast of Florida, but definitely looks quite healthy, and the Hurricane Center is showing this intensifying into a hurricane before landfall. Category 1 hurricane, minimal hurricane, but the H-WRF is definitely showing kind of an oscillatory impact back and forth with this thing. Let me show you the H-WRF, the latest H-WRF model here, and it can kind of show you that push-pull action that's happening. This is 15Z, so this is earlier this morning, and you had that convective burst that got pulled into the center. That led to latent heat release and led to surface pressure falls down near 1,000 millibars right now. Then that convective burst will weaken a bit. The new one organizes to the east of it, then that one's wrapped around the center, and then it undergoes another intensification trend. Tried to make another run at hurricane there on approach to the Florida Big Bend before weakening, and then going through southeastern Georgia, bringing with it big rain, even more decoupling between the surface low and the convection, and likely will regain tropical storm status, moving off the North Carolina Outer Banks and eventually toward the northeastern U.S. It definitely shows that oscillatory nature of this system, battling that wind shear, convective burst battling it, kind of carving out a little pocket for intensification. And we're just going to keep watching this until the next Hurricane Hunter mission up there confirms that this thing is up to a Category 1 hurricane. We'll just have to see if it can nudge above it. It's likely going to be very close to that boundary throughout its life cycle as it lifts off to the north-northeast. And I got to check on my tacos again, so I'll be right back. Alright guys, I'll show you these tacos real quick. Here they are. I smoked this pork butt on Saturday. But that's it right there. Mike Tice just sent me a message saying he's on the fence as to whether he's going to intercept or not. We are starting to get some warming cloud tops, as you can see with this here on infrared. Notice these warming cloud tops just a bit. It does look like, though, still quite healthy out here just to the north, so you're still getting some good latent heat release. Probably it's going to be enough to get this thing to a hurricane, if I had to guess. So now let me see if I can... I'm also working on some other things. Doing this edit for Hurricane 2020, so I could pull up some of these videos I can show you. Let me see if I can do it on here. Yeah. Here is one of these movies from Hurricane Laura from last year. And while this isn't going to be a Hurricane Laura, I still want to show you the edit. This is from Lake Charles. This is from Lake Charles, just as that Category 4 was arriving. One of the initial video edits that I put together. There you go.
I'm thinking of going where that chase is. It's really lit up over there.
There you go.
I'm thinking of going where that chase is. It's really lit up over there.
A little bit of Hurricane Sally here also. There you go. Show you the most intense part of Laura. This is
I'm going where that chase is. It's really lit up over there.
Deteriorate. Looking for that almost there. Here's Delta at least. There you go.
I'm thinking of going where that chase is. It's really lit up over there. Going where that chase is, it's really lit up over there.
And this is some drone footage from Creole, Louisiana, showing that mass destruction after Delta here. That was after Delta 2, and that hurricane came in just about 14 miles to the east of where Hurricane Laura came in. Here is our infrared, looking at that screen up there as well. I'm gonna go check out these tacos again. Be right back as I'm working some Hurricane Laura action here. Here's Hurricane Laura peak intensity. Oh! And a reminder that this is a Category 1 hurricane coming in here, so we're likely not going to see destruction like this, thankfully.
Hey, read, this building's coming apart with all the glass panels. They're getting blown through right now.
Go get to it. Point into it.
Back up?
Yeah, the sheet metal's in. It's coming our way because we're in that path. Just go back like 100 yards and you can pull right back into that thing. Keep going, less than 100 yards, keep going.
Oh, shit!
south. They're getting blown through right now.
Go get the... I'm pointing. Back up? Sheet metal, see that? It's coming our way because we're in that path. Just go back like 100 yards and you can pull right back into that thing.
I wanted to show you these tacos that I've been making. I smoked this pork actually on my Dominator grill. Smoked this shit. Sorry for that audio, but I smoked the pork on Saturday on the Dominator grill, and then added some of my homemade taco seasoning, some blended spices. Then I put in some tomato in there to give it a little bit of liquid. And then on top I put some avocado, sour cream, cheese as well. So there it is. There are my tacos.
Stop right there in
You
front of
guys
you.
are satisfied. I'd love to share these with you. I wish you could taste them. They taste pretty amazing. We are live right now. Tracking this storm. So you're also watching Hurricane Laura video in the background as I'm editing the 2020 hurricane highlight. But there's our intensifying tropical storm. Might be a hurricane. Gizmo wants tacos. So I'm going to be giving her some tacos too, and I'll be right back live once I knock these out. Welcome everybody, I am back live. Just finished my tacos. They were amazing. Possibly the best thing I've ever made, honestly. Smoked that pork using the Dominator smoker on Saturday. One thing I'm seeing here is a little bit of a warming in cloud tops. I'm also noticing on radar that there is a little bit lower reflectivity with that convective blob just on the north side of the circulation. If you are just joining us though, National Hurricane Center predicts that Elsa could strengthen into a Category 1 hurricane by the next update by 0Z. Latest Hurricane Hunter aircraft indicated about 1,000 millibar minimum pressure in the middle of the system, but it does seem like the H-WRF is onto something with kind of an oscillation between two counterweights. One are these convective blobs that keep developing just to the east of the center. They then propagate back toward the center, anchor just on its north side, release quite a bit of latent heat release, and that leads to surface pressure falls of that center just on the southern periphery of that convection. Then the convective blob loses steam. The wind shear kind of erodes it a little bit. The dry air comes in on the south side, chokes it off from this conveyor belt of moisture with the feeder band off to the east. And then the blob will spin down, a little bit less latent heat release, resulting in slightly rising surface pressures. But then a new convective blob will form right in the nose of this low-level jet, intensify, and then propagate back up shear toward the northern edge of that circulation, and then it releases more latent heat, leads to surface pressure falls, and then an intensification trend once again. And I think we're on a bit of a waning trend now. It looks like it tried to produce an eye. It tried to wrap around this convection on the western side, but then just the wind shear, the weakening convective blob there a little bit, kind of won out. And now you just kind of have this diffuse area of stratiform rain overspreading the center. But still, this is the dominant band right here, right northeast of the center. That's where the worst conditions are being experienced. Winds gusting to well over 70 miles an hour, probably pushing 80 out there in that band, well offshore right now. And you do have rain, rainy conditions across southwestern Florida. I am monitoring the Florida Peninsula for the development of supercell storms, but the latest runs of the HRRR have backed off on the development of this northern mode of supercells, basically an east to west band that was forecast to develop there within an environment of decent low-level shear. Not incredible, but not bad. About 100 to 120, 0 to 1 kilometer shear. But I think there's a little bit too much subsidence outside of this shield, and it's causing the winds to get a little bit wonky as well. Some of those 0 to 1 kilometer shear values don't look as impressive to the north of Tampa. So I think that this is likely going to be the dominant band of convection to watch, closer to that periphery of the stratiform rain out here. There's a little bit of a convergent band from easterlies over to southeasterly winds right along this. So I do expect potential of supercell storms to develop along this interface, and those could eventually head toward the Tampa area. But so far, not too bad in terms of tornadoes, but we are watching closely this system. Basically a comma head out here. It is battling that westerly wind shear. You do have these convective bursts that will fire on the nose of that low-level jet, propagate west, and then anchor to the north of that center. But too much dry air, a little bit too much shear wrapping around from west to east around the system, leading to a relatively dry western and southern semicircle here. I'll show you the H-WRF model. Show you this oscillation effect that it definitely has picked up on. And here it is. There's the H-WRF, and I think that this is exactly what's going to happen. It's had a pretty good handle on the structure of this system. After coming back on the warm waters off of Cuba, you get this convective burst that develops just east of the center on the nose of that low-level jet. That convective blob will propagate around the north side of the center, lead to some surface pressure falls of that latent heat release, and there you can see the result of that, dropping down to about 1,000 millibars. Incredible handle on this system. That's at about 18Z, so about an hour ago. But then it shows that convective blob weakening a little bit on its north side, and that leads to surface pressure rises back up to 1,004. But then you get the new blob of convection that develops on the nose of that low-level jet off to the east of it. There it is. develops near Cape Coral area, and then propagates back west to the north side of that system, and that could lead to another run at hurricane as it moves just to the west of the Tampa Bay area. Southwesterlies coming into Tampa Bay, piling up 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, even above ground level there, up into Tampa Bay, and then it heads up into the Florida Big Bend. Cedar Key, looks like this thing's going to be heading right toward you about 7 a.m. tomorrow, landfall, and then anywhere east of that center in the concave shoreline here definitely could get some robust storm surge out there. Interestingly, the hurricane models, let's take a look at those. I'm on the tropicaltidbits.com website right now. Great website for analyzing these. And most of the models show that 60 knots is about peak intensity, and then you start to see a downturn as it begins to oscillate in that westerly wind shear, and the dry air to the west of it will begin to win out. But the official forecast does bring it up to Category 1. That black line, and then it drops down after it makes landfall tomorrow morning. So in the next 24 hours, 12 to 24 hours, we could very easily see a low-end Hurricane Elsa. I think it's going to maintain tropical storm intensity and even weaken a little bit based on what I've seen so far. The pattern recognition so far with it ramping up and those convective blobs wrapping around the north side of the center, leading to those surface pressure falls, and then it'll wane a little bit. Almost an occlusion process happens, isolating the blob to the north of that center. Man, those gusts of winds. Shut that door and just about give me a heart attack. Wow. So headed back to the radar here. Let's actually go over to satellite imagery and take a look at how that blob is progressing. We're going to use the Gulf of Mexico view here. Slightly warming cloud tops. But boy, right near the center, still decent convection. But you can see just a gradual warming of these cloud tops as I think that it's starting to oscillate down a little bit. That convective burst will ramp up, and then when it generates some outflow, it can kind of counterbalance some of that westerly wind shear. But then once that burst starts to wane, then the westerly wind shear will start to erode it a little bit. That dry air will start to weaken the convection, and then it begins to pulse down a little bit. But then we got to watch for a new convective burst off to the east. It'll probably happen pretty close to the Cape Coral area. Might be happening even right there. Just a little bit of a convective burst noted there on the nose of that low-level jet, and that could easily propagate back west to the north side of the center and help proliferate this gradual intensification trend as this thing lifts off to the north. But again, the National Hurricane Center does show strengthening into a Category 1 storm, 75-mile-an-hour winds. The hurricane models generally have it already having reached peak intensity here to the north of the Keys, to the southwest of the Florida mainland. You can definitely see a nice comma head here in the infrared satellite showing the cloud top temperatures. But they are starting to warm in this zone here where you expect generation of those big convective blobs to feed in. So it's very possible that we have reached peak intensity. Quite curious to see what the next Hurricane Hunter aircraft is showing. Visible satellite definitely shows that dry southern edge. Almost like a dry line surging in on the southern edge of the system. Dry punch coming in here. You can definitely see these easterlies, and it does look like the convection was propagating pretty far west and has kind of hit a wall there just a little bit, but still some decent convection over that center. Still quite a bit of latent heat release happening out there. See if I can take off that forecast track. We can see it a little bit better. Boy, you can really see that spin in the convective elements. Look at that. Definitely spinning around. Then you've got that low-level jet off to the east of it, a little bit of dry air. So I do expect another convective burst to develop on the nose of that and then propagate back in. But look at the outflow too. You can see these feathers from the convective burst definitely showing a little bit of an anticyclonic outflow pattern. And that so far has been able to counterbalance that relatively weak westerly wind shear. Still pretty far ahead of that upper level low. You can see these banding features curling into the circulation. These are what are feeding these convective bursts. This is are what fed this initial convective burst that originally developed off to the east of the center, then propagated back on the north side of that rotation. But boy, it looks like this in general is a big, massive circulation here. The low-level circulation right there. The upper-level circulation just a little bit decoupled, a little bit to the northeast of it. You kind of have this tilted vortex that you can even see here, looking at the two-dimensional satellite imagery, the center up. And that's a cyclonically rotating pipe there, basically a heat engine. Most of your latent heat release is happening up here within that convective blob, but because this is a tilted vortex, it's leading to pressure falls at the surface just a little bit to the southwest of it. Interesting satellite presentation on this thing. A lot of substance right here. Probably kind of an elongated, very large eye with this circulation with a convective blob right on its northeastern side. Feeder bands feeding in here almost like a low-level jet off to the east, getting ready to feed the development of another convective explosion that will propagate west into this thing. Almost like a subtropical storm. Obviously it is a tropical storm because it is tilted and not totally decoupled, but it does have some subtropical characteristics to it as well. You can see the tilt though, that's incredible. The low-level circulation down here, tilting up to that mid-level circulation where that convection is located. Let's go on back to the radar again, as we're also watching for the maturation of any tornadic supercells. We can definitely see the spin within the convection. And just because you're seeing this on radar, this spin here, doesn't mean that the surface cyclone is located there. This is pretty far away from Key West radar, so we're scanning up pretty high up in the storm. Looks like that center is located a little bit to the southwest of that spin. So it does seem to be getting a little bit more tilted right now. The dry air wrapping around this south side seems to be winning just a little bit as this convective burst is definitely trying to solidify on the north side of the system. That's probably the most dangerous portion of the storm right here, but once this gets a little bit closer to the shoreline, it's these southwesterly winds that are a big concern. Once these come in on the backside, just piling up that water into the bays, once that gets a little bit closer to Tampa Bay, probably 10, 11 p.m., maybe closer to midnight, that's when that 3 to 5 foot storm surge will get pushed up here into Tampa Bay. It's possible you could also get a 2 to 3 foot surge down here in the Cape Coral area, although those southwesterlies, the strongest ones, are going to be a little bit offshore. And then it's going to head up toward Tampa. This evening, conditions will start to deteriorate up there as well. I am hoping to get some ASLives from Mike Tice. He's still on the fence as to whether he's going to chase this or not. He's still down in the Keys, but he might head up to Tampa, and I might be able to sling some ASLives for me as well. Gonna get this banana look to it, comma head. We see if we have any more information, any Hurricane Hunter aircraft that might be out there. They were delayed, their flight this morning was delayed a bit. A lot of dry air there in the Caribbean behind this thing. Look at all that dry air in the eastern Gulf of Mexico wrapping around the south side of this circulation here. I do think we're getting a little bit of a warming here of the cloud tops, just a little bit. Well, it's not the case. You kind of have a nice invigoration there of the convection right in the middle of that blob. Low-level center is a little bit to the southwest of that, so you still do have a tilted cyclone from the southwest up to that blob. Definitely has some cyclonic spin to that blob there as well. But looks like that's right where that band is located, where the worst conditions are right now, lifting off to the north. So once that comes ashore, near Tampa this evening. That's when conditions are really going to deteriorate there. A lot of cloud cover preventing the development of any surface-based storms. We did have that tornado warning to the southeast of Labell earlier. Labell. But then that cloud cover kind of took over. This convection here near Orlando has struggled to develop into supercell storms. And it just looks like this cloud cover is just advancing too rapidly. It's kind of curtailing the development of any surface-based instability. And a majority of the wind shear that's conducive for tornadoes is really hugging the northeast quadrant of this system, just offshore. And not a lot of surface-based instability for the development of convection closer to that center. If this little hot tower here gets on the north side of the center, it could be just enough to send this thing over to a hurricane right there. So there's a lot of late heat release happening in this tower with those cold cloud tops going from the very warm ocean surface. A lot of heat release in the mid-levels of the troposphere, and that's still leading to surface pressure falls with this tilted vortex all the way down to the surface. Just have to keep an eye on that, but definitely a hot tower here, a little supercell storm. Trying to rotate in there could be just enough to send this thing over the edge and to get a Category 1 hurricane. So here is the Hurricane Hunter aircraft data that finished. And it definitely shows that the strongest winds are in the eastern quadrant associated with this convective blob, 50, 60, 70 knots out there. You got some strong southerlies as well to the east. But this is concerning within this dry air and these inflow streamers, almost like a sting jet happening here. You get those 50-knot orange barbs right there, those southwesterly winds just southeast of the center. That's what's going to result in the strong wind shear. You can also see some pretty strong easterlies in that northern eye wall, right in the northern fringe of that circulation. Looks like a bit of an eye there, but a dry western and southern side of that circulation. There you can see that fix of about 1,000 millibars here, right in the middle of that circulation. So it's right on the southern edge of that convective burst. This wide little eye to the west of it. Hurricane Hunter aircraft were not able to sample that western quadrant, but definitely some very strong winds just to the northeast of there out of the southeast, and then quickly a lot of curvature over to an easterly direction there as well. So that's the last Hurricane Hunter mission, and it shows that spike, that red line, down to about 1,000 millibars. There you can see it. That's the extrapolated sea level pressure there, pretty close to that wind minimum as well. Also get a peak surface velocity of about 60 knots there, just in the northeast eye wall there, within that heart of that convection. So this is some pretty interesting data here that came in, and that's what led the National Hurricane Center to upgrade its forecast and to predict the development of a hurricane. It looks like that convective blob is definitely moving more easterly, so that's kind of helping to battle this shear. This convective blob is sending out just a little bit of outflow aloft, and that's counteracting that wind shear a little bit, carving out a little favorable pocket of environmental conditions for this thing to continue to intensify. So now let's take a look at the models for Friday. Because Friday, I think, is going to be a big day. Could be one of those where there's a surprise derecho that produces like 100-mile-per-hour winds when everybody's eyes are on this kind of tropical cyclone. It has been kind of a fluffer at times. So here is the GFS 500 millibar update, and that system in the Pacific Northwest is the one to watch. And there is a bit of a preceding system that rides over top that ridge. This is a big anticyclone over the Four Corners. Textbook monsoon flow on the western edge of that anticyclone, getting that influx of tropical Pacific air. This vortex over the Pacific Northwest is going to ride over top this ridge. This is Thursday evening. So we move forward to Friday. And this is at Friday at 0Z. It is a little bit slower, this wave, coming into Nebraska here. Punching into western Nebraska at 0Z. Could be more of a central Nebraska type of an event, eventually heading toward Iowa. But the timing is a little bit slower compared to when I looked at it last. Definitely putting Nebraska into play here. This will be along an outflow boundary, central into eastern Nebraska, left behind by that earlier convection from that subtle jet streak. So definitely looks like a central Nebraska type of an event now, with the slower arrival of that wave. Relatively weaker southerlies there. It's kind of looking like the development of a big complex of storms. Maybe a derecho. Northwest to southeast movers, so they're going to be turning into those relatively weak 850 winds. Let's see what the NAM shows now that we're within the NAM envelope. It does show a little bit faster, that wave, a little bit more spread out. You can see this positive tilt, basically a neutral tilt though, with respect to the northwest to southeast oriented flow. A belt of strong westerlies down to the south. Look at this 50-knot jet streak impinging on central and eastern Nebraska there. Exciting and nice low-level jet. The NAM has a much better handle on this thing than does the GFS. It's not able to resolve those smaller scale features at the low levels. And look at that environment here in central Nebraska. Hastings out toward Omaha. Probably a front, southwest and northeast oriented front. Low-level jet banking up against that front. Right near Hastings, looks like the triple point. Big looping hodograph there. And look at the favorable conditions out here near Omaha. Wow. Big textbook northwesterly flow hodograph there. My head is blocking it, so I'll take my head out of the way. And look at that big hodograph curve for a southeasterly moving storm here over Omaha. A lot of low-level cape, dew points into the mid-70s. Big cape up there. Big turning as well. So this looks like there could even be a threat of a strong tornado or two across eastern Nebraska into western Iowa, right along the Missouri River, back toward Hastings. Big low-level jet punching into that outflow boundary left behind by a complex of storms. Initiates the triple point back here, so you're going to have to decide whether to play the triple point or wade out into eastern Nebraska in that favorable environment, maybe for something to come down out of the Norfolk area up there. But we're just going to have to get a little bit closer. It does mix out across south central Nebraska where you get those storms, but look at the moisture wrapping up into the northeastern portion of the state. So you probably want to play up near Norfolk and then chase those southeast toward the Omaha area, developing up first into northeastern Nebraska, turning southeast into that moisture pipe there, those mid-70s dew points streaming up into that environment. Surface lows probably back here near the triple point. Deeper surface low than Elsa is currently. They're right about the same there on Friday evening. You could play the triple point well mixed air. Could get burnt with that though. But playing a little bit further northeast along that warm front, that trough extends all the way up into northeastern Nebraska. I do expect to see arc of supercell storms southwest and northeast, central Nebraska sliding off to the southeast. So this is what I'm going to be chasing on Friday. I'm letting Elsa go just to chase this thing. Look at it break down and suppress that anticyclone a little bit as it extends over top of that. Sounds like the Twister reboot rider might be out with me again, which is exciting, indicating that it could be happening. Then this system slides off to the southeast, putting eastern Kansas into the Kansas City area in play. An arc of supercell storms develops from eastern Kansas toward Kansas City ahead of that jet streak, and definitely could be a 2-day tornado threat. Saturday, look at this low-level jet. So we're in July, and we're going to be chasing severe weather in eastern Kansas. Usually crazy things will happen with these setups. Sometimes they can be duds. And then looking at the long range, looks like we start to get a breakdown of this anticyclone. The Canadian season's probably going to light up around July 11th, July 12th. So now let's go back to Elsa again here. And I need to get my RM Young anemometer, pull open the box for this thing, and send that over to Mark, as he is working on that right now as we speak. Almost going on 2 hours live here, folks. So let me get a screwdriver here really quick and get that information for Mark. See our young anemometer there. Take off this and look at the inside. So yep, we're waiting for this recon data. That'll probably be enough to get this thing to a category 1. You can see that little convective burst that's on the north side of the center. Does look like it's trying to wobble a little bit to the west, doesn't it? As that convective blob is going to the northwest as well. And that's also what the HWRF showed. Definitely shows that kind of oscillation with these convective bursts developing and then propagating closer to the center. Yeah, I think landfall near Tampa, but I wouldn't be so focused on it where the exact center goes, because if that center goes just to the west of Tampa, that's when you're going to get the worst impacts with those southwesterly winds getting funneled up Tampa Bay. That's the biggest concern that I have right now with this system. And looking at the Hurricane Hunter aircraft data, there's a good 50 to 60 knot southwesterly jet with that dry air that's trying to wrap around the south side of the circulation. Let's look at visible satellite here really quick. Once again. I think you've got kind of an elliptical shaped center. Even though the center is pretty close to this area, I think you've got kind of this ellipse action going with convection on the north side and latent heat release leading to surface pressure falls. But it's kind of leading to this tilted egg-shaped low-level cyclone that tilts up aloft with height. Southwest and northeast-oriented tilt now. This has always been a tilted system. But now that it's turned north, you don't have that other mechanism that led to it being tilted. When you had faster trade winds underneath that would kind of migrate the low-level center off to the east, whereas the convection would remain with the weaker flow aloft. But then once it makes that turn to the north, and it doesn't feel that effect of that mid and lower tropospheric wind shear. But now it's a different mechanism that's leading to the tilting. With that upper level low that's located to the south of Louisiana, that's creating some southwesterly wind shear right now across this Gulf of Mexico here to the east of this upper level low, back to the south of Louisiana, and a little bit of dry air in between it too. Dry air kind of trying to erode the western and southwestern side of that convection. But whether it's a tropical storm with 70 mile sustained winds or a low-end hurricane with 75-mile-an-hour winds, you don't necessarily want to split hairs like that. No tornado warnings. You can see a lot of the Florida Peninsula is socked in with clouds, so we didn't really get the development of those bands of supercells yet within this. But I do think this evening we could get a bit of an invigoration of these. Even these bands up near Orlando are not showing anything in the way of a supercellular structure, kind of propagating with outflow off toward the coastline. Might have been just a little bit too dry up there as well, and now all this cloud cover has mitigated the development of surface-based instability. Really, this whole storm is this convective blob here, and the HRRR shows it, or the HWRF shows it oscillating, so the burst will intensify, lower those pressures, and then it'll kind of weaken, and then a new convective burst will develop on the nose of this almost low-level jet-like feature out of the due south. Right at the nose of that low-level jet, you'll get a convective burst. It'll work all the way to the west on the north side of that circulation, lead to more latent heat release. Right now I'm taking off the box of this RM Young anemometer to get the serial number to Mark, who is finalizing the Dominator weather stations in time for hurricane season. Still got the Surgeonator sensors in here. Would have been great to be able to deploy those up and down the coast for this one, but they just weren't quite ready yet. Oh, here we go. Tighten this thing back up. Got my model number of the RM Young. These are made in Traverse City, believe it or not, these RM Young anemometers. So my Uncle Bruce actually lives up there. He's the one responsible for all my penny stock pickups since last March. Good old Uncle Bruce, the source of all great advice. He says I gotta be careful not to get old man syndrome, which is when you know everything about everything. It's okay to say I don't know, even when you're monitoring these tropical cyclones. But keep an eye out for these Dominator weather stations. We're gonna be rolling these out here pretty soon. Mark even designed our own ultrasonic anemometer for collection of data inside these storms. He's gonna be chasing up in Alberta through the middle of this month. And this RM Young is going to be mounted on top of Dominator 4. Although Dominator 4 is having some overheating issues right now. Ooh, just felt some outflow, maybe some storms developing in here in the foothills. Can't believe these things are like $2,000 for this RM Young anemometer, something like that. Way expensive when really I think what you're paying for is a calibration in a lot of ways and just to be legitimate, so just to be doing legitimate science. But by designing the Dominator weather stations, we're making research grade instrumentation for the common man, common woman. All right, let's get back to this. Let's get back to our friend the convective blob here. Take a look at radar. It's like watching a really slow-moving, weak tornado with flash flood potential. It does look like that convection is getting stronger based on radar out here. You can see this blob starting to get even better organized. Feeder band now is feeding into it instead of a little bit off to the east of the circulation. So it's very possible this thing's going to make a run at hurricane intensity within this little convective core, a very compact tropical cyclone, but they are capable of intensifying and weakening more rapidly than those larger hurricanes. Kind of have a double banded structure to this convective element here. Strongest winds are right in that convective blob. We'll have to see if this thing can get up to hurricane. Incredible tools here. So we're waiting for this next update to see if it will become a hurricane. It's possible it already has. Let me take a look at the NHC site here really quick. Still a tropical storm, 70 mile an hour. Again, that hurricane warning is in effect. Here are the, this is the official NHC track, the latest one. Pull this up here for you really quick. Showing landfall tomorrow morning, early, as a potentially as a Category 1 hurricane. That is the official track right now. The red is the hurricane warning. That includes the Tampa Bay area up through a large portion of the eastern half of the Florida Big Bend region. Making landfall very close to Cedar Key tomorrow morning. Category 1 hurricane lifting off to the north, eventually turning off to the northeast. Tropical storm watches in effect here from southeastern Georgia, including St. Simon's Island up there through the Savannah area, Hilton Head Island to just south of Myrtle Beach. But very likely we could see that extended off to the northeast as well. This is the official track, passing just to the west of the Tampa Bay area by about midnight, bringing those strong southwesterly winds into Tampa Bay, bringing with it a potential 3 to 5 foot storm surge, and then curving right toward the Florida Big Bend and sending a wall of water near into the right of the center, 3 to 5 feet. So that's a life-threatening storm surge, certainly. Now officially forecast to be a hurricane as it lifts off to the northwest, and we're going to be running live all the way through the evening. I might have to take a little bit of a bike ride too. But we've got this egg-shaped convective core, and then at the surface, that cyclone is pivoted a little bit at more of a southwest and northeast oriented ellipse. So it's interesting how it tilts with height. You kind of got this vortex that's shaped like an egg at the low levels, and then as it encounters that westerly shear, pivots and becomes an egg-shaped convective core there above. That's its heat engine up here. This convection is releasing latent heat up there, leading to surface pressure falls at the low levels. And with this convection being that healthy, I think that's going to be enough to send it over the edge and likely be up to Category 1 strength. But either way, whether it's a strong tropical storm or a Category 1 hurricane, these southwesterly winds on the southwest side of the circulation, wherever they come ashore, likely going to be near or just to the south of Tampa Bay as well, and to the north through the Big Bend region. Looks like at least a 3 to 5 foot surge. See if Mike's going after this thing. He's still on the fence right now as to whether he's going to go after it in Tampa. There have been some warming of the cloud tops just a little bit. These are the 18Z hurricane model intensity. And most of the models show it already reaching peak intensity, but the official forecast, along with a couple of those hurricane models, show it nosing up into Category 1 in the next 12 hours, and then a quick deterioration once it comes ashore there in the Big Bend. Many of the models, though, show this system already peaking and just beginning a slow weakening process, kind of that westerly wind shear and dry air to the west of the vortex, kind of winning out just a little bit as this weakens. So, probably going to go live once this comes ashore through this afternoon and evening. I'd like to get some ground reports. There are plenty of storm chasers out there, I'm sure, in the Cape Coral area, or they're rocketing up north to try to get into position for the landfall or in Tampa Bay to cover that storm surge. I was watching this band here that's right on the leading edge of that stratiform precipitation for the development of supercells, but these things are just too strung out. The thermodynamics or the instability is not supportive of tornadic supercells developing. I thought there were going to be two zones where they could develop right here along the leading gradient of the stratiform precipitation. And I was also watching the potential of another band developing up here near Orlando over toward Homosassa Springs. That didn't really materialize, became outflow dominant, now is moving offshore over the open Gulf, and just a lot of cloud cover now. A lot of cirrus clouds, a lot of puffy clouds now taking over this. My neighbor upstairs likes to stomp, walks with their heels first, and whenever you walk with your heels like that, I think it can be pretty bad for the knees. And it's also very inconsiderate to the people that live below you. But I think people like that, they like to hear noises because they associate that with productivity. So whether they're banging pots and pans, slamming cupboards, walking really rapidly, I think that tells their mind that they're being productive humans because they hear that sound. I'm the opposite. I like to be as quiet, usually as quiet as possible, unless I'm intercepting a tornado. But when I walk, I like to walk on the balls of my feet, almost doing a sliding motion too. But that's one thing about living in these apartment buildings. When you live with other people in the same building, it's just a problem that you have to deal with. I tend to be pretty hypersensitive of noises, but they woke up at 4:45 in the morning this morning. Gizmo gets all upset. I feel like she thinks that the footsteps are like hailstones hitting the car or debris or something like that, so she's not sure if she should be upset or not. But this is the circulation. You can see the cyclonic spin to this upper level circulation. The surface spin is a little bit to the south of that as well. Waiting for this new hurricane reconnaissance data, but I still think that the zero-Z data is going to show a low-end hurricane here, but there's really no reason to split hairs. As humans, we like to place things into buckets and categories, but really nature hardly exists like that. It's just a continuum of vortices. It does look like this conveyor belt here is getting shunted off to the east, and then you've got this one streamer of southwesterlies feeding this convective blob. This convective blob kind of anchored right in the nose of this enhanced convergence here. And some of those convective elements have been propagating east to west around that center. The outflow here, the edge of the outflow is pushed east to west, kind of counteracting that westerly shear out ahead of that upper level low. That's near the central Gulf Coast region. Scanning up a little bit higher up into these elements, you could definitely see big time latent heat release happening where you get such runaway condensation in this deep convection. Oh! My hurricane Laura video, making a 2020 recap edit from the record-breaking season last year. Just devastating to see this damage there at Lake Charles. This is the eye wall of a Category 4 hurricane from Dominator 4.
Hey, read this building's coming apart with all the
I
glass
thought I got
panels.
6
They're
months
getting blown
worth of
through
auto
right now.
insurance for the Dominator 4, but I really chased all of those hurricanes. And then I came back and realized that I only had 6 months worth of insurance that expired, so I chased this whole entire hurricane season with no auto insurance.
No point into
And it survived, thankfully, so keep consistent there. But one thing about chasing a Category 4 hurricane at dark is you don't see a lot of the debris zooming by, but there were radio towers that were getting knocked over just probably about a half mile away from us here that you couldn't see. Really all you can see is your field of view is compresses right around the immediate vehicle, so you really don't witness the scope of the destruction until the next day when you go through those damage surveys. That one last building, the skyscraper there, and Lake Charles has all the windows blown out. Storm chasers were running around at the base of that with glass falling everywhere. One of them almost bled out and got a cut in their leg, but thankfully there were some medics that were able to apply pressure to the wound, and that they cleared that really half of the day the base of that building. Storm rising, pretty aggressive last year. Very right now. Supposed to air here in the U.S. in October, right after Wicked Tuna. So I think Wicked Tuna is going to air first, and then our show will air right on the tail end of that. Here's some of that drone footage after Hurricane Delta from Creole, Louisiana. Just showing the scope of the destruction out there. And there was a 1-2 punch last year with Hurricane Laura coming in, and then 14 miles to the east is where Delta came in. And there was also Hurricane Zeta that was upgraded to a Category 3 out here along the Louisiana coastline. And this is some drone footage showing that the recovery really didn't happen after Laura all the way up into Delta. We're not even sure if they've rebuilt down here in Cameron Parish, down in the Creole Cameron area. Sure that they've rebuilt. There were a lot of RVs that came in there after the fact. The people down here definitely take things into their own hands. Their recovery largely. Beautiful area down there with those oil refineries dotting the horizon as well. When we were chasing Hurricane Zeta, there was actually a massive oil refinery on fire, and you just saw this storm surge whipping by. Big time storm surge from Hurricane Zeta. I could show you guys that video right now actually. And we were going after the storm surge for Hurricane Zeta, so we were deploying the network of surgeonator sensors out there. There we go. There's Hannah, first Cat 1 hurricane of the year. And I'm going to show you this storm surge from Hurricane Zeta, if you will. Ah, there it is. Indeed. Here's some of that surge from Zeta that came bubbling up. It's operating a little choppy as I'm running this off my external hard drive. But there you can see that storm surge from Zeta. This is in Venice, Louisiana. And the surgeonator probes measured a storm surge of nearly 7 feet in the Buras area there. And that was included in the report with this hurricane upgraded to a Category 3, making landfall there in south central Louisiana, just west of Grand Isle. But definitely a lot of storm surge just to the east of it. This is right at the mouth of the Mississippi River, southeastern Louisiana. And we were walking right on the edge of the shoreline as that water came rushing up, and then we retreated back to the Venice Marina. The owner of the Venice Marina there calling us cuz. Hey, cuz! And it's possible we could see a storm surge of that magnitude there. What you're seeing right there, that's about a 3-foot storm surge in Venice. And we're going to see 3 to 5 feet for sure around Tampa Bay, maybe the north of there, near the Florida Big Bend region as well. We're watching this convective blob just continue to mature there with the system. Interesting to see the next hurricane under data. Weird looking egg-shaped storm. All right, everybody. There you go.
And we've actually seen clear skies, even a couple rainbows.
That's the live update.
On the south side.
Thank you for joining me for this live update here, breaking down potentially coming up to Hurricane Elsa, possibly a Category 1 coming up next. I am going to take a little break until we have more information here. Conserve the internet, maybe pump out a couple live updates on Facebook. Take Gizmo out to see if she'll take another dump. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for this update. I'm going to continue to do live updates through this evening. I am doing a podcast at 6 p.m. for some young meteorologists as well. Excited about that. Norman Smith is his name on Twitter, doing that podcast, so that'll be a good time. And that convective blob just continues to expand based on Tampa radar there. So we'll just have to continue to watch it. And I'll be back live here for the next update, as we'll likely have a Category 1 hurricane, Hurricane Elsa, approaching the Tampa Bay area, and especially the Florida Big Bend just to the north.